We're going to go ahead and get started. We are in Nehemiah chapter number 7. Nehemiah chapter number 7. And as you might have remembered from last week, we are at a big transition point in the book of Nehemiah. The wall is done. But the project for which, the purpose for which Nehemiah came is not. Really just the first phase has been completed. You know, good leaders know the importance of setting realistic goals. You ever have a situation at work where you have a goal set for you that it's not possible? I remember back in my UPS days, I knew roughly, depending on a few variations, this one particular truck, I could fit about 250 packages on this one particular truck. And we would get a forecast. And the forecast, when the forecast said 300 pieces, I knew that won't work. And I'd go to the boss, and the boss would either listen to me and change it and reroute some things, or not. And do you want to know what happened when they wouldn't listen to me? Who has a guess what would happen? Disaster. What was that? Disaster. What else? What happened? Kind of. Sometimes. Yeah, a bunch of packages that don't fit. And then my area, I'm stacking all the boxes around me, which has because I always had 3 trucks. So that's just one. But when you're stacking 50 boxes all over the place that won't fit because they go on your truck, but now you're limited in being able to get to the other ones, and then hence the disaster ensues. Sometimes people have unrealistic expectations. A good leader has realistic expectations. And the thing is this, without clearly defined objectives, it's really hard to build a team spirit. If you don't know what to expect, it's hard to build a team spirit. And so in establishing attainable goals, provision should also be made for evaluating that progress. And so for anticipating the next major objective, these are all important things. You can do this in your family, you can do it in church, at work. If I ever do counseling, and sometimes certain counseling situations are pretty good. They're not. Everything's going smoothly and people are doing well, and that's how you want it to be. But sometimes you've got some real problems. Problems that aren't easily fixed. Sometimes in counseling situations, you have people, this is shocking, but people will lie because the truth makes them look bad. People will say they're going to do something, but they have no intention of doing it. Now, when one of the things I like to try to do, I don't always do this, but I would say I regularly do this, is if I perceive a problem, I like to create a solution that is measurable, all right? Measurable. That way we can see if it's being done or not. That way we can see if someone's serious or not. So like, let's say this is a fictitious situation, but let's say, a husband's out of work and his wife is upset because she does not feel that he is trying to find a job. Feels that he's just sitting at home, not making good effort. Do you think that's probably going to be a problem sooner or later? Yep, it will be, all right? There's nobody in this situation right now, so this is a completely fictitious situation. But that is going to be a problem. So I come in, and her wife's upset. Husband's like, I'm trying. All right, well, what we're going to do is come up with a goal. How many applications should be sent out a week that is sufficient? And what is the barometer? Because, you can go down and apply at, McDonald's, but that's probably not going to pay your mortgage, all right? So let's be realistic in here. So how many applications are going to be sent out, and they need to be jobs that are within a certain pay range that we agree is acceptable, all right? And so we come up with a husband, wife, and me together a measurable guideline of what will happen. Well, then next week or next month, however we frame it, we say, okay, so show me what you did. Oh, well, I didn't apply anywhere. Okay, now we have a problem because you're not serious. Measurable. Good leaders set up goals that there's the next objective is measurable. So Nehemiah's first objective was to build the wall of the city. He was motivated. He motivated the people to work with him at different times. He was able to measure the advancement of the people under his leadership. How could he measure the advancement? Simple. The wall went up. That's how he measured it. Or how are we doing? The wall's getting built. That's how we know we're doing. He allowed for interruptions. Maybe you're like this, or you know people like this. There are people in the world that are really good when they get their mind to something. Like they are all in. That's good. It's not bad. But have you ever been this way, or have you ever known somebody that they can't audible, they can't pivot, they can't, in other words, they're going to do it, and they're doing it this way, and there is no deviation. But the problem is the dynamics within the operation change, and they've got to adapt on the fly. And the big picture to get the job done might be, hey, you got to take a time out. You got to take a time out, and you got to deal with something over here, because if you don't and keep plowing on the main project, this thing is going to hinder you greatly. See, some people can't do that. A good leader can. A good leader can realize, I am here to do this job, but this thing's important. Because if I don't handle this right, this job's not going to get done right. And so he allowed for interruptions. And in your life, you got to allow for interruptions. Guys, you get busy, all right? You're going here, you're going there. You got to go to work, you got to do this, you got to do that. Hey, can I tell you, sometimes you got to take a time out and recognize when your wife needs to talk and give her undivided attention and help her and spend that time that, yeah, you got 10 other things you got to do. I know, all right? And it might just be, hey, check out my new jewelry and look at it, all right? Look at it, right, honey? and be, well, try to be excited. I don't even know what I'm looking at. I can't figure out half the time if it's a necklace or a bracelet or because they're wrapped up and you know. But you know what? I have learned that, guys, you gotta, and sometimes I'm joking about jewelry. Sometimes it's something they just really need to talk about. You got to commit that time. That's important. Yeah, you got yard work to do. Yeah, you got projects at the house that need to be done. You got to, go to this meeting, that. I get it. You're busy. We're all busy. They're important. You got to plan for some interruptions to your schedule and give the people, sometimes from a pastoral perspective, man, I've just learned this a long time ago. My plan never, ever works. I just come to embrace it. I tell people, embrace the horror, all right? Come up with your plan. I'm all about planning. Plan your plans away. It's wonderful. It's good. But my day is never going to go the way I think it's going to go. I'll be like, all right. And it's not just my day. Sometimes I'll plan out my week, all right? Because I'll be like, okay, Monday, nothing's getting done because I got to do this. All right, Tuesday, all right, I can probably get a little bit done. Oh, Wednesday's my day, man. I am going to crank out a message. It'll be, because Thursday, I'm gone all day. Friday, I'm swamped. Saturday, I'm busy till the night. I got no time. Wednesday afternoon, man, we are getting that message done. And I'm telling you, without fail, I'm going to sit down and I start to do that message, and my phone will ring. And I will spend the next 3 hours going from phone call to phone call to phone call, and I got nothing done that I planned on. But you know what? Every person that I spoke to probably needed it. It's a worthy interruption. All right? You figure out your stuff later. Here's how I word it. Have I ever not had a message to preach? No, always had one. 15 years, I've always had one. So It might not be in my time frame. Has there been a day where I've put together Sunday night's message, Sunday afternoon? I have a couple of times. Not often, but it has happened. I can't do that now because of ministry, preaching out. But years gone by, it happened once or twice. Not ideal, all right? But you got to allow for interruptions. Now, we see that he allowed for interruptions and finally finished the wall, and the first objective was complete. Now, before the building of the wall was completed, he took inventory of the situation. His enemies are harassing him, but this didn't prevent him from planning ahead. Nehemiah is about to begin phase 2 of his greater plan, which is, we're calling it consolidation or strengthening of the work. And what Nehemiah chapters 7 through 11 is exactly that. It is him strengthening the work. He built the wall, okay, but at the end of the day, that's just a wall to keep people out. Doesn't help the leadership that's there. And does Nehemiah have some leadership problems in Jerusalem at this stage? He sure does. The 2 months of work on the wall, you know what it did? It showed him, I've got problems. I've got some real deep-seated problems here. I've got a lot of division. I've got a lot of people that are two-faced. I've got a lot of problems, and that came out in that 2 months of work. Now he's got to work to fix those problems. He really didn't fix them. He made peace. He got the job done. And so this plan, even though it's not revealed to the people, had already taken shape in mind. So in other words, phase 2 is already worked out up here. He already knows where he's going. Now, I talk with other pastors, particularly younger guys. They get so caught up in what's happening in the moment, they don't see the big picture of what they're trying to do. And I'm like, and I tell them, brother, you've got to get a bigger vision for where you're going. You ought to have a plan for where you desire the church to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Now, it may not come to fruition exactly the way you envision it, but where are you going? You have got to be thinking about that. The finance committee, if you were to talk to them, they will tell you that any of the things that we do often are the seed of the idea is planted in their mind a couple of years before we actually even attempt it. And because I have a lot of different ideas. Do we do all of them? No. But I'm always thinking further out. There's what we're dealing with right now, okay? But then there's where we'll be in 6 months, a year, 2 years. And it is critical in any leadership style that you be thinking like that. How about parenting? I just had this conversation with somebody yesterday. You know, there's really two aspects, or there's a lot of aspects of parenting, but a couple of thoughts. You can affect behavior in a child. In other words, if you really want to get a child to do something, you can use a lot of measures to make something happen. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily helpful. So in other words, if you know, your teenager's driving you nuts and you want to they don't always have the best attitude and you feel they're making you look bad, well, you can silence them. There's ways of doing that. But you're also building a lot of resentment. And what you're doing is while you're fixing the short term, you're damaging the long term. Instead, have a bigger picture of, okay, I'm dealing with some aggravation. They're doing some things that aren't right. You know, sometimes, and I've said this before in my leadership style, sometimes I see people making mistakes and doing the wrong thing. And I let them. Well, Pastor, why'd you let your kid do that? Or Pastor, why'd you let this person do that? Well, it's simple. They don't listen. So I could strong arm them into not doing it. I have that power, that ability. But then they'll just resent me. So I'm going to let them fall flat on their face and be there to help them up. And say, hey, will you listen now? Because what you're doing isn't going anywhere good. And you're hurting right now, aren't you? And they say, yeah, I am. So I knew this was going to happen. I just waited for it. And now there's a better chance, whether it's a child or an adult within the church, they will listen better. And so, you have a plan in your mind. So it's very important that leaders always be planning ahead. One author had this to say: it never pays in business to get so bogged down in the problems of the present that you lose sight of the future. Either it's opportunities or it's pitfalls. All right? So opportunities and pitfalls. Got to be looking out for both those. Proper planning concerns all of us, whether we're in business, church, missions, education, politics. It really doesn't matter. Proper planning is absolutely critical. And Nehemiah's advanced planning illustrates the ways we make an adequate preparation for the future. So as we examine Nehemiah's plan for strengthening what he had started, we begin this analysis of Nehemiah chapter 7. Now, this chapter is pretty similar to chapter 3. Who remembers what chapter 3 was? Does anybody remember what Nehemiah chapter 3 was? There was something unique about it. You can look at it and probably figure it out. It was simply a list of names. It's a list of names. You look at Nehemiah chapter 7. After the first 4 verses, what do you start seeing? A bunch of names you can't pronounce, right? Yeah. Here's what I will not do. I will not go around the room and have everybody read a name, okay? I am not going to do that to myself or you. We won't probably read through this list of names either, okay? Guys, if you have any last-minute changes of names, there's some good ones in here. Boy or girl again? I can't remember. Girl. All right. I'm sorry. Forgive me. Yeah. Let's see. I don't even know. Most of these are probably guys, but man, you can't even tell. I mean, you just. And nowadays, does it really even matter? People pick names all the time. It's just you don't know what they are. But anyhow, I probably shouldn't have said that. So quickly, to understand this chapter, we need to understand its place in the book of Nehemiah. So the first 6 chapters are Nehemiah accomplishing his first objective, which is building the wall. Chapter 7 is transitional, and it records the first step towards the work of consolidation or strengthening of the local government there. This move towards consolidation is going to be interrupted by spiritual awakening in chapters 8, 9, and 10. All right, spiritual awakening in chapters 8, 9, and 10. But this is will resume the consolidation will resume as after God has prepared the hearts of His people for self-government in chapter 11. Okay, so He starts a process. Okay, He's trying to strengthen the local government, and all of a sudden revival breaks out. And so what does He do? He stops. He says, "This isn't as important." And He lets God's people, He lets their hearts get right. Once that's done, then He picks up His process of strengthening the government again. Yeah?
Was he still with them, or was it before?
So Ezra is a contemporary, and I'm not sure of the exact times because I have not done an exact study. What I'll do, Tim, is I will look at the time frame of Ezra and him and see where they interconnect. I'm not sure off the top of my head because I didn't prep a comparison to Ezra. So next week I'll have an answer for you on that. It's a good question. So I just don't know the answer off the top of my head, and I'm not going to act like I do. Let me, and I'd be completely guessing, 50-50. Like, yes, it is. No, it's not. And some people, you should know that. Well, I don't. And you know what I'm not great on is dates. I'm not a great date guy, like not taking my wife out on a date, but like, well, I mean, I'm pretty good. I'm not cheap. We go out to nice restaurants, right? You're just being a pill right now. I love you. I know. I'm going to talk about the muffin later. No, I'm not going to say it now. That's my introduction to my morning message. I don't want to ruin it. I am a restaurant snob. I'm just gonna let me explain. Let me explain. So in college, not Bible college, but up at Plymouth, I worked at a fine dining restaurant, and I worked with professionally trained chefs from literally some of the best institutions, not only in the country, but in the world. I mean, I worked with a guy who was trained in Germany, worked with another guy, Johnson in Wales, AIC was another one. These are very prestigious culinary institutes, and these guys just happened to come together, and I worked there, and they knew food. They taught me so much about the restaurant business and food. And I worked there for, 3 years, something like that? I mean, I was actually working the line and learned how to make, I didn't have the degree, but I could cook the food just like they could. And so I understood good food. And it's all gone. This is a skill. Skills can be learned and lost, all right? It was a season, exactly. And so, but anyhow, going out to eat, and it's like, I'm paying this for that. I know what they did. This is microwaved. And so I just became very particular just because literally my lunch was whatever was on the menu. I always got a free meal. And so I ate fine dining food all the time and just became very particular. And it's like, if I'm going to spend the money, I want it to be good. And so I despise chain restaurants. I do. I just don't like them. I'm not against you guys. When we were down south, oh my word, shoot me. It's all there is. And we just didn't go out to eat because one, we had no money, but two, I was like, it's so good. I'm like, they were like, man, you haven't been here. This is so good. I go, that's because you don't have a palate. And down south, I was a little bit more feisty than I am now. I definitely have. All right, who are my southern people? One, two. West Virginia's southern enough, even though they make fun of them. Kentucky. Okay, so you guys understand something that most people here don't understand. That they're still fighting the Civil War, and they are. It's not a historical thing. Yeah, no, right. But they're not kidding. We're laughing right now about the Civil War, and they'll start, and then it's like, you're the enemy.
Oh, exactly. You're the enemy.
Yeah.
Like we do in North and South.
Right.
When we picked out North, it was like,
yeah. And I was from Massachusetts. Legitimately, people disliked me on principle. And I had no clue. I'm walking in there, and they're like, oh, Yankee. But I'm like, what is the deal? And I would get made fun of all the time for being, I didn't even say anything. And so after about 6 months, I was like, forget it. It's on. And I went on the offensive. I did. I spent the next 3 years ripping people apart just because. And I said, now look, and they learned to stop. I said, guys, let me explain this. It's going to take you 3 weeks to come up with a comeback, and it's going to take me 3 seconds. So don't even bother. And they did, man. But they were good. They were good. They remember when they got the Burger King sign, and they made fun of me in downtown. The town was King, and there was at Burger King, when they answer the phone, they'd say, Burger King Kang. I'm like, it's the same word. We're in King. And you just said Burger King Kang. They're like, because that's how it's said, is Kang. And I'm like, get me out of here. Lord, where have you? Don't tell me God does not have a sense of humor. He does. Yeah, so they put a sign up there when after the Patriots had lost to Carolina. It was after the Super Bowl, but the next year they lost the first game of the year or second game of the year. And they put the sign, hey, Chris, and it was the sign of the Pats. And then somebody took a picture of it and put it in all the inboxes for the whole college, of all the other students. And so there's a conspiracy against me town-wide. And yeah, I was like brand new. I hadn't even become a real jerk yet. And I think that's actually that was like, oh, it's on.
I mean, in our defense, it's Haverhill.
Yeah, stop it. We are not interested in inconsistencies.
We're talking about how it's actually spelled.
Listen. Hold on. We derive our pronunciation from England, and so therefore, see, I can excuse that, all right? Time to move on. Yeah. Better text me about the Ezra question. So, the first thing that we're going to see here is we're actually going to read the first 4 verses, all right? It says, "Now it came to pass when the wall was built, and I had set up the doors, and the porters, and the singers, and the Levites were appointed, that I gave my brother Hanani and Hananiah, the ruler of the palace, charge over Jerusalem, for he was a faithful man and feared God above many. And I said unto them, let not the gates of Jerusalem be opened until the sun be hot, and while they stand by, let them shut the doors and bar them, and appoint watches of the inhabitants of Jerusalem, everyone in his watch, and one to be over against his house. Now the city was large and great, but the people were few therein, and the houses were not builded." All right, so we'll stop there. And so basically what we see here is he appoints 2 people into leadership, and we'll talk about that more. But following this, God prompts him to take a census of the people. And so this is done with the view of determining the purity of the people and the priesthood. And so this is in anticipation of repopulating the city of Jerusalem. And so verse 5 through verse 69 is basically just a census of the people that are there. And so this leads into Nehemiah ensures proper support for those engaged in the service of the house of the Lord. Turn over with me to verse 70, all right, verse 70, all right. And it says, "And some of the chief of the fathers gave unto the work, Shatha gave to the treasury 1,000 drams of gold, 50 basins, 530 priests' garments. And some of the chief of the fathers gave to the treasurer of the work 20,000 drams of gold and 2,200 pounds of silver. And that the rest of the people gave was 20,000 drams of gold and 2,000 pounds of silver and 7 priests' garments. So the priests and the Levites and the porters and the singers and some of the people, the Nethinims, and all Israel dwelt in their cities. And when the 7th month came, the children of Israel were in their cities." So that's actually, the latter part of that verse actually fast forwards 7 months. All right? So that really isn't, that's actually the next part, that last part of that verse. So what we see here is there's this provision for all the people involved in the service of the Lord. And the result of Nehemiah's own advancing plan of God's prompting is a big step towards the revival of national prestige. So, also this revival is going to help them to understand God's plan for their life. So let's now let's start to look at these verses for a little bit here. The first 4 verses is really what we're going to look at right now. And we're going to talk about selecting good leaders. Nehemiah initiates phase 2 by selecting reliable men for whom he can delegate responsibilities. And we see this in verse 1 and 2 again. "And it came to pass when the wall was built, and I had set up the doors, and the porters and the singers and Levites were appointed." Now here, verse 2. "That I gave my brother Hanani and Hananiah, the ruler of the palace, charge over Jerusalem, for he was a faithful man and feared God above many." So what leadership qualities do these men have? And there's a fair question to be asked here. Was Nehemiah guilty of nepotism by assigning his own brother administrative leadership within the city? Nehemiah's actions need to be viewed in light of his position and his commission. And in appointing new leadership, he exemplifies what Alexander Hamilton had to say. He put this in words. He said this: the aim of every political constitution is, political constitution is, or ought to be, first, to obtain for rulers men who possess most wisdom to discern and most virtue to pursue the common good of society. And in the next place, to take the most effectual precautions for keeping them virtuous. So the idea is this, is that when you're trying to select leaders, you want people of character. Character is key. Are they virtuous people? And if they are, then you also want to take steps to ensure they remain that way. And in Hanani, Nehemiah sees a man who's concerned for others. Yeah, it's his brother. But that doesn't mean he's not qualified for the position. If he were unqualified for the position, it would be a problem. But as long as he's qualified, I've had conversations with a few people, a few pastors, and just talk about some of the things that transpire in churches. And I will say that, and I'm sure this isn't just independent Baptist churches, but I know it can be a problem, is nepotism with independent Baptists, particularly as it pertains to staff, right? Now, you don't never experience that here, but what can happen sometimes is you have people that, larger ministries that are hiring assistants and different people, hire their sons, their grandsons that have little to no experience and quite frankly are not qualified, but because they're related, they get the job. And there's other people who have put in a lot of work in those ministries that are overlooked because of and they're far more qualified, but they are not given the opportunity. That would be that's nepotism in its negativity. But on the flip side, if you have a relative that clearly is qualified, you shouldn't overlook them just because they're related, all right? And so there needs to be a balance there. The truth is, Nehemiah knew Hanani very well. They had been raised in the same home. Nehemiah knows Hanani received the same basic training he did. Nehemiah is a man of character. That has been proven. And he knows his brother. His brother's the one who told him about Jerusalem in the first place. He trusted his assessment, and his assessment was spot on. And so he knew how he was raised. Nehemiah had entered the king's service and became a part of the king's court. Hanani, being a patriot, left the land of his birth and returned to Jerusalem, probably with Ezra, all right? Because Ezra went back beforehand, okay? And so he probably went back with Ezra, and he saw the plight of the Jews and felt it necessary to petition the king. And Hanani was commissioned to go unannounced back to Babylon to intercede on their behalf. This reveals not only his courage, but also his confidence in his countrymen that were in Babylon. He knew he needed help. He knew things weren't good. And so he travels back. He goes to his brother, who he knows is in the king's court, and he tells him the situation. And so he also had confidence in the countrymen that didn't come back. This shows a lot of character on his part. Having these qualities, Nehemiah doesn't hesitate to place him in position of rulership over the city. So Hananiah, we see the second guy, different guy. There's Hanani and Hananiah, all right? Two different people. That can get confusing. And Hananiah is made commander over the fortress. He's faithful to the Lord and loyal to his word. He absolutely needs to deal with these traitorous Jews in high places. That's what Nehemiah knows. He's got people who don't have his back in high positions. He knows that. The building of the wall revealed it. That he's got a political structure, he's got a leadership structure around him that's no good. He needs to start putting people he can trust that share the same spirit in key leadership positions. And he trusts this guy. And the families within Jerusalem, there were those that were traitors that tried to lead him astray, and he knew this. And Nehemiah knows also from his political background, okay? Because remember, he was in the king's court. And the king is a politician. Remember, what is one of the reasons why, do you remember, who remembers this? I talked about it a little bit. Why was the king probably so willing to send Nehemiah back to Jerusalem? There was a key political reason. Does anybody remember what it is? Go ahead. Well, trade, commerce, and money, but there was something we talked about, and I didn't go into great detail on it. It was quite a while ago. Go ahead.
Keep from the enemies, from like you had the...
Bingo, bingo, bingo. To the north, okay, at this time, there had been a revolt of the people north of Jerusalem against the king. But because of political issues, the man who led the revolt remained king. The revolt was put down, and I don't know all the details behind it, but basically the guy who led the revolt, because of a variety of political factors, while handcuffed, still was in charge. And the king knew, given the opportunity, that guy will come against me. And so the key was to keep him powerless. And there was also in Egypt, some rumblings against the rulership of the king. And what the king didn't want was those two entities to unite. And what stood between them? Israel. A strong, loyal Israeli area divided those two entities and would keep them from uniting and could prevent a type of rebellion or an uprising against his authority. So he understood politics. This is why he was willing to let him go. And so there's a lot of history there that I went in over a while ago. But so anyhow, he was willing to let him go. But he for many years had been in this environment. And so he understood something. If a coup is going to happen, a coup is a military takeover of the government. You need the backing of what? Yeah, you need the military. You need key leaders in the military to back your political uprising. So what does Nehemiah do? In verse 2, he makes Hananiah the ruler of the palace, which is the military. He makes sure, first thing, my leader of my military has got my back. It's the first thing he does. He's wise. And this is why it is critical to have a godly man in this important position, particularly at this time. And so Nehemiah's actions, we see him handling a potentially difficult situation wisely, while placing a member of his own family over the city of Jerusalem may at first seem like an act of nepotism. The fact remains that Hananiah is a very qualified individual for that position. And given there's a good chance that he's probably of royal blood. How do we know this? Who was brought over to Babylon in the captivity? It was the kingly line and the royalty. All right? That's who was brought over. And so most likely he is of noble descent of some sort. And so that he will command that respect as well. And so he'll command respect within the citizens that are there. Some, however, will question the wisdom of such a move. Look, in life, when you're the leader, you have to accept a reality. You're going to make judgment calls that are based on principles of wisdom, but at the end of the day, they are judgment calls that you have to make. And you must accept, when you're the leader, that no matter what you decide to do sometimes, you're going to be criticized no matter what you do. Doesn't matter what you do. Because if you make this move, then this group will criticize you. But if you make a move that makes this group happy, this group will criticize you. You have to accept that. It is part of leadership. You're going to be criticized. And so could somebody criticize this move? Absolutely they can, and I almost would anticipate it to happen. A good leader knows, yep, there's probably somebody who's going to criticize this. But I stand by it because it's not because he's my brother. It's because he is the man for the job. And so you hold your position and know that these things can happen, all right? We find think about this. Having carefully selected new leaders, Nehemiah illustrates a second principle of sound administration, which is the development of one's subordinates. And this is really, really good. You can be a good leader. All right? You can be a good leader. But how many people can you actually lead by yourself effectively? You ever thought about that? Like, how many people can you directly lead effectively as one person? I don't know that number, but what I can tell you is this: it will be small unless you develop subordinates who support you and share your vision and are leaders as well. And then you can grow your leadership. Where, yeah, you're the leader, but if you don't have people under you, behind you, backing you, communicating the same message of you, displaying the same spirit that you have, you're going to be limited. You're going to be limited. And so one of the key things of leadership that we really haven't touched upon is the development of subordinates that are empowered to exhibit leadership themselves. He is putting Hananiah and Hananiah in key leadership roles where they are going to have authority. You want to know where most churches go sideways? Is when leadership does not back the pastor but undermines him. That, hands down, is one of the biggest problems that exists in churches. I have long held a position, we don't have an assistant, all right? We don't have, Joe does the youth, he's a volunteer youth guy, all right? I've seen more problems from youth pastors, caused more church problems than probably anything else I've ever seen. Is youth, you say, well, youth pastor? Yeah, youth pastor. Causes more problems by, first off, to me, putting a 20-something-year-old guy in charge of your teens just seems like a really bad idea. I don't know where this idea came from of putting a 22-year-old guy in charge of the teenagers. That just seems like, hey, let's play with matches with a bunch of places where fireworks are stored. Like it is just a disaster waiting to happen. And if the guy is single, are you out of your mind? You say, well, what does that matter? I can tell you stories. Like the girl that graduates from high school and is the next day dating the youth pastor. Gee, how'd that happen? It happens. And it's a disaster, okay? You should not be putting young people. I don't have a problem with maybe a 20-something-year-old guy being on staff somewhere. He should be working with the children, not the teens, all right? We'll never do that. I also will never, this is a personal thing, I will never bring in somebody at this stage. I feel firm on this, and I don't know that our church will ever be in a position to take on a full-time second person, all right? I would have probably a full-time secretary. We have a part-time secretary. I probably have a full-time secretary before I have a full-time pastor, because a lot of the things I need help in are administrative, all right? And Emily does a great job on a part-time basis, and we're right where we need to be. But if we ever had a full-time person, it would be in-house. I am not going to bring somebody from the outside that doesn't understand our philosophy of ministry. Because why? There's too many. I know me, and I know the way I operate. I'm an independent Baptist pastor, and our core doctrine is going to be the same as every other independent Baptist church out there. We are not any different on core doctrine. But in matters of operation and secondary issues, I operate very differently than my brethren. I love them. I appreciate them. I'm not disparaging of them in any way. I appreciate the work they're doing and what they stand for. I just have some different opinions on a variety of things as it pertains to family, women, people, the congregation, the role of the pastor, the role of the pastor's wife, children. I just have a lot of different ideas on, and even some approaches in evangelism, all right? I have some different ideas that I am not criticizing anybody, but I've got to follow the Holy Spirit in the manner in which He tells me to lead this church. And unless I have clear teaching from the Scripture, I'm not going to do something just because that's the groupthink of a bunch of other people that I like, but I'm not going to be like them in those ways. And that's just not who I am. I don't do things to make friends. I do things to honor God. And if people like me, great. And if they dislike me, honestly, I'm not going to lose one bit of sleep over it. That's my nature. If you say, well, I don't like you. Good, fine. You know what? I give you credit. You actually had the guts to tell me to my face, because most people don't. And I won't. I'll give you props. Like, man, they actually said they didn't like me. I respect them a little bit more than most people that just chirp on the phone and have no courage. That's me. That's how I am as a person. I am not afraid of confrontation one bit. I won't lose sleep over it. I will say what I have to say. I'll be very kind. I won't lose my cool. And that's just the way I operate. So there are people that have different ideas. I'm not going to bring somebody in who doesn't get any of that. Why? Because they usually are going to end up being one of your biggest problems in the church. And that's no good. So I would want somebody in-house who understands our philosophy of ministry and the way we handle people, all right? You know, you can, we're out of time. All right, I'll say this and then I'm done. All right. Sin happens in a church. It does. It does. People make mistakes. People do wrong things. And particularly newer converts are going to have a transitional time, and they're not always great. And you guys know this. You can blow that person out of church in 2 seconds. You can blow them right out. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And that doesn't always work for people. They think you're soft on sin. They think you're soft on, you're a compromiser. No, I'm not. I've just never forgot where I came from. And God's been good to me. So, all right, Lord, bless the service to follow. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. All right, guys, got a break.